Hi, I'm Maureen Cavanaugh. Today on Midday Edition, how well is local theater doing to include all the voices and communities in San Diego? This is KPBS Midday Edition. Connecting our communities through conversation. Theaters in San Diego, both large and small, are coming back from the rupture of the pandemic. They're working to excite audiences and welcome back actors, many of whom have been doing other things over the past few years, and reestablish San Diego as a major regional theater hub. But as local theater revives itself, it's also committed to eliminating racist policies that have kept actors and creators of color marginalized, overlooked, and silenced. Today, we're talking about how local theater groups woke up to the racism in their ranks and if they're doing enough to fix it. KPBS arts reporter Beth Accomando is here. Hi, Beth.
Hi, thank you.
And William B.J. Robinson also joins us. He's a San Diego artist, as well as host of both Tough Talk, a bi-weekly virtual discussion series, and KPBS Art. B.J., welcome to the program.
Thank you for having me.
So let me start with you, Beth, and help us recall the oddity of last June when San Diego Repertory suspended operations just as accusations of racism and misogyny were brought against the company. What happened there?
Basically, the cast and crew of The Great Con, which was being presented by the San Diego Rep, issued a statement on Instagram, and it addressed the Rep's announced suspension of productions and basically said that the reason that was being cited, which was financial challenges, was just kind of the tip of the iceberg. So the statement was made by actress Michaela Bartholomew and director Jess McLeod. And I want to just read basically the opening of this letter, which contained a litany of complaints. And so what they stated was, from poor financial decisions to rampant racism, misogyny noir, mismanagement, predatory efforts to take advantage of newly unionized BIPOC creatives, discrimination and disrespect, racial profiling of hired artists, physical intimidation, ill care following injury, lack of support for BIPOC artists and art making, and the constant refusal to acknowledge that you were and are the root of the issues at hand. We see only the tip of the iceberg. So, this was a lot to come out. And, the fact that the Rep was suspending production and that its co-founder, Sam Woodhouse, was planning to retire last September, I think sort of deflated some of the criticism in terms of, the company was sort of going away. So these issues were also raised, interestingly, on the Rep's own podcast called We Are Listening, which was produced in conjunction with La Jolla Playhouse. So, these issues were being made public and were out in the open. And I think basically, brought to a forefront stuff that had been happening for quite some time.
So after that, BJ, what have people had to say about diversity or racism in local theater on your Tough Talk program?
The overall message that most people bring to the table is that a lot of work has been done in San Diego theater, especially over the last 3 to 5 years, to have greater representation, equitable diversity, productions that really do reflect the community as it is here in San Diego. And at the same time, there is still a great deal of work to do. Kind of harking to what Beth mentioned in some of the issues brought up by the cast of The Great Con, a lot of the challenges they faced in that production are not new challenges and are certainly challenges that a lot of artists of various marginalized identities here in San Diego have faced at SD Rep and at other locations over the years. There have been moments where there have been a greater collective awareness of the people making decisions to hear artists and to understand what some of these challenges and problems are and to find new ways to overcome those challenges. but there seems to be a never ending habit of kind of almost throwing in the towel after so much effort and getting back to a focus on the capitalism and the consumerism that theater also brings in, especially here in San Diego.
For the outside observer, okay, you look at the San Diego Rep, and you see that in recent years it's launched the Latinx New Play Festival as well as the Black Voices Play Reading Series. So, as I say, on the outside at least, the Rep was one of the most diverse theater groups. Let me ask you both. Let me start with BJ. What was missing?
With regards to the Rep, you could say in many ways they wrote the rubric on the boxes that needed to be checked to understand how to implement and celebrate diversity in San Diego. Now, that rubric, I think, was written a long time ago and did not necessarily receive the updates that it might have needed along the way, to a point where the Rep, very much like you said, did look to be an organization that was really reaching out to the communities, that was really celebrating different artists and bringing different stories and different focuses with festivals into their productions. And at the same time, they clearly were continuing in practices that were harmful to many artists. And so I think what was missing was the collective awareness on, are we actually meeting people where they are? Are we actually caring and understanding for the artists that we're bringing in? Or are we assuming a position of knowing better?
Knowing better than the artists themselves, you mean?
Yes, knowing better than the artist, knowing better than the current state of community, knowing better than the actual needs of the artists coming into the spaces. While some problems have not changed for decades, many certainly have become more nuanced as we've had a greater understanding that not all Black people are the same. Not all Latinx people are the same. And while you may continue in specific pursuits to celebrate diversity, you may also be creating blinders to moments where you are falling short in having equitable, authentic representation and celebration.
And Beth, I get from what BJ is saying that this doesn't even automatically happen if you have people of color in management in theater companies. Is that right?
Well, I mean, I think the thing that the Rep really points out is that you can have a public face that checks a lot of these boxes, but the change has to go deeper than that. And that includes people of color in administration, but also just the sense that just because we're putting on a play by a Black artist, that may not be enough. Is the company supporting that particular Black artist's point of view and voice? Are they trying to change like how that director or that writer might want to cast the show? Specific ways that they may want their characters to speak? I mean, how deep does the support of those artists go? And, you know, that's hard for the public to determine because we can't see what changes are being made behind the scenes. We have to rely on the artists themselves coming forward and saying, I didn't really get to have my voice heard because of this, this, and this. But then what this also points to is that because the Rep was giving artists of color an opportunity to showcase their work, that also made it harder for some of the local artists, I think, to speak out because here they are getting an opportunity, which I'm sure they relished. But how do you speak out against the person who might be giving you that opportunity and not threaten your own career or not jeopardize your chance of doing something else or, you know, any number of things? So it's really complicated. And I think it goes to the depth of the issue in the sense of how far deep down do we really start to need to make changes?
BJ, because this is such a complex issue and the problems are so fundamental, it seems, where do you start to change?
I believe it all starts with open, transparent communication in conversation. At the same time, I think that is something most people fear. I think there's such a great fear of publicly explaining oneself or one's choices and one's actions due to anything that may happen from it, from ridicule to shame, to being ostracized. And yet I think that's always going to be where it comes back to, that we need to have a bit more transparent, open conversations about what our needs are, what our challenges are, as well as how we check in on each other to actually assess and evaluate progress or challenges as they are being met.
Is the fact that some theaters are capitalist and want to make money, is that part of the problem, BJ?
I believe that is a part of the problem. There are some theaters that I think the eyes is on the financial prize. However, I think there are plenty of theaters who have their sights set on truly meeting their own goals for being safe havens of diversity and representation and equitable practices. But at the same time, they are burdened by the capitalist needs to sustain themselves, to stay afloat. One of the statements I know I've heard just timelessly for decades is that any organization would do more for diversity or would do more for greater representation or better access if they had the money to do so. But they can only afford to either have so many programs or so many productions or take a risk on some sort of event that might ultimately lose funding regardless of how much they put into it, and that there certainly is a hindrance out of the capitalism behind things.
Beth, is there anything audiences can do?
Yes, I think so. And I just want to dovetail off of what BJ said. And I mean, money is key on multiple levels. And, one of the things that would help enormously is if there was more financial support for theater as a whole, because if a large company didn't have to worry about a particular show making a profit at the box office or doing well, they might gamble on more young artists, local artists, plays that haven't had a chance. And smaller companies would have more opportunities to put on plays and reach people if they had more funding. I mean, so, the audience has to do a little research themselves. So think about who you're supporting with your money and respond to what the shows actually are. Did you feel that they satisfied you on any of a number of levels? Were they good productions? Did they represent who you feel you are or who you feel those characters were accurately? And if you had an issue, say something.
I've been speaking with KPBS Arts reporter Beth Accomando and William B.J. Robinson, who's a San Diego artist and host of Tough Talk and KPBS Art. And when we come back, we'll hear how local theaters and performers are working for change.